Behind the walls of a millionaire mansion, an isolated child lived prisoner of her own silences. Everything changes when a new employee, marked by loss and pain, crosses the girl's path. What seemed like just a job turns into a miracle, but hidden forces conspire to destroy it. When the truth finally comes to light, no one escapes transformed, and love is reborn where there was only suffering. If this story has piqued your interest, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching us from. We'll continue. I promise this will be the best story you'll ever hear in your life. High in Bel Air, a neighborhood that housed Los Angeles elite, the Reynolds mansion stood imposingly between high walls and a meticulously kept garden. The white walls and enormous glass windows reflected the morning sun, creating an illusion of perfection that hid the torment lived within those walls. It was an ordinary Tuesday for the residents of Magnolia Lane, but inside that luxurious residence, despair had a name, a face, and was only 7 years old. Sophia Reynolds, the only daughter of Richard and Victoria Reynolds, was having yet another one of her crises. Her screams echoed through the mansion's corridors as the little girl thrashed on the floor of her room, decorated with princess and unicorn themes, a cruel contrast to the reality she faced. Her brown hair, normally styled in elaborate coiffures at her mother's insistence, was now disheveled and damp with sweat. "Sophia, please calm down." Richard Reynolds' tired voice, CEO of one of the country's largest technology companies, sounded helpless in the face of his daughter's suffering. Tall, with firm features and eyes that carried the weight of fatigue and worry, Richard watched the scene with a mixture of despair and helplessness that had become his habitual expression over the past few years. Beside him, Dr. Mark Davies, the 10th specialist hired to help Sophia, shook his head negatively. "Mr. Reynolds, the crises are intensifying. We need to consider a more intensive approach. Perhaps a specialized clinic." "Absolutely not." Victoria Reynolds' sharp voice interrupted the doctor before he could even finish his suggestion. Victoria emerged in the corridor, wearing an Italian silk ensemble and jewelry that cost more than her employees' annual salaries. Slender, with perfectly dyed blonde hair and a face that revealed more the effects of Botox than genuine emotions, she kept her distance from her daughter's room, as if Sophia's suffering were contagious. "Can you imagine what people will say? A Reynolds daughter institutionalized? Not in a million years," she whispered, adjusting the diamond bracelet on her slender wrist. "Richard, fix this. I have the charity collection launch tonight, and I can't show up with dark circles under my eyes." Richard closed his eyes for an instant, taking a deep breath. Arguments with Victoria were becoming increasingly frequent and fruitless. While his wife worried about appearances and social events, he watched his daughter sink into an abyss that seemed to have no end. "Doctor, continue the treatment. We'll intensify the sessions and adjust the medication." "Money is not an issue," Richard said, ignoring his wife's impatient sigh. Downstairs, oblivious to the scene unfolding, the Reynolds mansion staff performed their daily tasks in silence. Mrs. Eleanor Thompson, the housekeeper who had served the family for almost 20 years, supervised the cleaning with her usual efficiency, though her gaze occasionally turned to the ceiling, towards Sophia's room. "Is the little girl having another episode?" asked Yvonne, one of the house's longest-serving cleaners. Eleanor merely nodded with a sorrowful look. "Poor child. It's the 3rd time this week alone, and none of these expensive doctors seem to help," the housekeeper murmured, checking if no one was around. "What this girl needs can't be bought with money." At that very moment, the mansion's doorbell rang. Eleanor adjusted her impeccable uniform and walked to the main door. Outside, a young woman waited, holding a small, worn leather suitcase. She had brown skin, black hair pulled back in a simple bun, and brown eyes that carried a peculiar mixture of sweetness and sadness. "Good morning, I'm Lucy Miller. I'm here for the job interview," she said, with an accent that betrayed her southern origins. Eleanor quickly examined her, noting her calloused hands and simple but clean and well-pressed dress. "Ah, yes, the agency called to let us know. Please come in." Lucy stepped inside the mansion and couldn't contain an expression of astonishment. She had never seen so much luxury gathered in one place. The Italian marble floor, the crystal chandeliers, the artwork on the walls, everything screamed wealth and power. "Impressive, isn't it?" Eleanor commented, noticing the young woman's awe. But not all that glitters is gold, my dear. Lucy merely nodded, following the housekeeper to a back room away from the employer's eyes. There, Eleanor asked the usual questions: prior experience, references, availability. Lucy answered everything sincerely, mentioning her years working in family homes in Charleston, South Carolina, before coming to Los Angeles. "And why did you leave there?" Eleanor inquired. A brief silence settled before Lucy responded, her voice slightly choked. "I needed a fresh start, Mrs. Thompson. After he was gone, I couldn't stay there anymore." The housekeeper noticed the glint of restrained tears in the young woman's eyes. "I'm so sorry, my dear. How did you lose your boy?" "My Gabriel had autism. I couldn't afford the treatment he needed." Lucy swallowed hard, unable to continue. At that instant, a louder scream from Sophia cut through the air, making both women instinctively look up. "Is that the employer's daughter?" Lucy asked. "Yes, little Sophia, 7 years old and suffering like an adult. The doctors aren't sure what she has. They say it's a combination of disorders, anxiety, maybe autism too," Eleanor explained, carefully observing Lucy's reaction. "Would that be a problem for you?" Lucy shook her head negatively. "Not at all. In fact, I volunteered at a special needs children's support association in Charleston. That's where I learned to cope with Gabriel." Eleanor's eyes brightened for an instant. "You're hired," she declared to Lucy's surprise. "We need someone with experience and heart here. Little Sophia needs more than doctors and therapists." That same day, as Sophia's screams finally subsided, turning into exhausted sobs, Lucy was introduced to the house's routine. Victoria barely cast a glance in her direction, merely warning Eleanor. "She doesn't go into my closet or my bedroom, understood? And keep her away from guests when we have events." Richard, for his part, merely waved distractedly while on the phone, absorbed in a business crisis. Neither of them imagined that this simple woman, coming from the South with a small suitcase and a broken heart, would be capable of completely transforming their lives. When night fell over the Reynolds mansion, Lucy was finishing her first tasks. As she passed the corridor leading to Sophia's room, she heard a low, restrained cry. She stopped, hesitant. Eleanor had explained that only specialized nannies and therapists were allowed into the girls' room, but something in that cry touched her deeply, awakening memories of her own son. For an instant, Lucy closed her eyes and made a decision that would forever change the fate of everyone in that house. Lucy remained motionless before Sophia's bedroom door, her heart racing. The girl's sobs continued, interspersed with irregular breathing that betrayed her exhaustion after hours of crisis. She looked around, making sure no one was watching her in the deserted mansion corridor. She knew she was about to break an important rule on her very first day of work, but something stronger than reason compelled her. With gentle movements, she turned the golden doorknob and partially opened the door. The room was a violent contrast between the opulence of its decor and the emotional chaos that reigned there. Expensive toys lay scattered on the floor, silk sheets disheveled, and in the center of it all, a small figure huddled by the headboard of the bed. Sophia's eyes were red and swollen, her disheveled hair framing a pale face marked by tears. She wore silk pajamas with small embroidered butterflies, which seemed too large for her fragile body. When she noticed Lucy's presence, the girl cowered even further like a frightened animal. "Hi, Sophia," Lucy whispered, remaining close to the door. "My name is Lucy. I'm new here at the house." The child didn't respond, merely observing the stranger with wide, suspicious eyes. Her small hands tightly gripped a well-worn teddy bear, the only object in the room that seemed to genuinely belong in that environment. "Did you know that where I come from in the South, we have a special song to chase away sadness?" Lucy continued, taking a hesitant step into the room. "My grandmother used to sing it to me when I was little, just like you." Sophia remained silent, but her eyes never left Lucy's face. It was the most attention anyone had gotten from her in weeks, something even the most renowned therapists hadn't achieved. "May I sing for you?" Lucy asked, approaching slowly. "If you don't like it, I'll stop right away." Without waiting for a response she knew wouldn't come, Lucy softly began to sing an old lullaby from the rural South. Her voice, gentle and melodious, filled the room with notes that seemed to dance in the air, laden with emotion and memories. "Lullaby, my sweet boy. The moon is soon to rise, the stars along the way will help you close your eyes." As she sang, Lucy drew closer, until she sat on the edge of the bed. Sophia watched her every move, still clutching the teddy bear, but the tension in her small body visibly began to lessen. The wind brings the song, from the land where I was born. Close your eyes, my love, for I am here. The simple melody continued, as Lucy risked a gentle gesture, extending her hand towards the girl without touching her. To her surprise, Sophia didn't recoil. Instead, after long seconds of hesitation, the child moved her own small hand towards Lucy's, touching it with the lightness of a feather. It was at that exact moment that the door opened completely, revealing Mrs. Eleanor Thompson. The housekeeper's eyes widened, ready to reprimand the newly hired employee for disobeying the rules, but the words died in her throat when she witnessed the unbelievable scene. Sophia, the girl who rejected physical contact even from her own parents, was voluntarily touching Lucy's hand. "My goodness," Eleanor murmured, raising a hand to her mouth. Lucy stopped singing, fearing a reprimand, but remained motionless, afraid of breaking the fragile bond established with Sophia. "Mrs. Thompson, I know I shouldn't be here, but I heard the little girl crying and—" "Shh," the housekeeper interrupted, entering the room and softly closing the door behind her. "Keep singing, please." With a nod, Lucy resumed the melody, while Eleanor watched, amazed. Sophia not only allowed the touch, but now her eyes began to close, her body visibly relaxing as the song enveloped her like a protective mantle. "I've never seen anything like it," Eleanor whispered, when the music ended, and Sophia finally fell asleep, still lightly holding Lucy's finger. "Not even the strongest medications can calm her like this." "It was my grandmother's song," Lucy explained, with a sad smile. "It used to calm my Gabriel on the hardest nights too." The two women remained silent for a few minutes, observing Sophia's now peaceful breathing. It was Eleanor who finally broke the silence. "No one can know about this, Lucy. Not the employers, not the doctors. Especially not Dr. Melinda Foster. Dr. Foster, the family's psychologist. She's been with the girl for almost a year and assures the employers that only she understands Sophia's case," Eleanor explained, with evident distrust in her voice. "She charges a fortune per session and sees no progress whatsoever. Imagine if she finds out that a housekeeper achieved what she couldn't." Lucy nodded, understanding the situation. Carefully, she extricated her hand from Sophia's, who was now sleeping deeply. "Don't worry, Mrs. Thompson. I'm not here to cause trouble." The two silently left the room, unaware that for the first time in months, Sophia was sleeping with a serene expression on her face. The next morning, while serving breakfast in the main dining room, Lucy tried to remain discreet, but couldn't help observing the Reynolds family's dynamic. Richard, impeccably dressed in a tailored Italian suit, frantically checked his phone while drinking coffee. From time to time, he cast worried glances towards the stairs, clearly awaiting news about Sophia. Victoria, on the other hand, leafed through a fashion magazine while complaining to her hairdresser on the phone. Her gestures were calculated, her posture perfect, as if she were always posing for an invisible camera. "I don't care if she's sick. I need my hair ready for the Women Entrepreneurs charity luncheon," she said, irritated, completely oblivious to her husband's tension. It was at this moment that Eleanor appeared at the door, with an expression that mixed surprise and relief. "Mr. Reynolds, Sophia woke up and is asking to have breakfast on the veranda." Richard nearly dropped his cup. "Is she having a crisis?" "No, sir. She's calm. She slept through the night. No nightmares." Richard immediately stood up, while Victoria finally diverted her attention from the phone. "It must be the new medicine, Dr. Mark Davies prescribed," she commented without real interest. "I'm going to see her," Richard declared, abandoning his unfinished coffee. Lucy remained at her post, serving discreetly, while trying to suppress a small smile. Little did she know that same morning, her interaction with Sophia would be witnessed by someone else. In her luxurious office in Beverly Hills, Dr. Melinda Foster organized her notes for Sophia's session, scheduled for that afternoon. Tall, elegant, with impeccably straightened brown hair and clothes that screamed professional success, Melinda had won the Reynolds trust with her exclusive and personalized approach. What no one knew was that behind the facade of professionalism, Melinda harbored a growing obsession with Richard Reynolds. In her personal diary, kept under lock and key in her desk drawer, The psychologist dedicated pages and pages to describing her fascination with the businessman, fantasizing about scenarios where he finally realized Victoria didn't deserve him and turned to her, the woman who could truly understand him. More than a simple attraction, Melinda had developed an elaborate plan to get closer to Richard. The longer Sophia continued her treatment, the more time she would have to win the trust and eventually the heart of the girl's father. The child's slow progress, therefore, was not a problem, but an advantage. The phone's ring interrupted her thoughts. It was Maurice, the Reynolds family's driver, whom Melinda had carefully co-opted as her informant within the mansion. "Dr. Foster, I think there's something you need to know," he said, in a conspiratorial tone. "There's a new maid here, a Lucy, and little Sophia, well, she seems different since this woman arrived." Melinda felt a chill down her spine. "Different how, Maurice?" "She's calmer. She slept through the night. And now she's having breakfast on the veranda with Mr. Reynolds. Mrs. Thompson commented that she hasn't seen her like this in months." Melinda's fingers tightened around the phone as an unpleasant sensation spread through her chest. Years of careful work couldn't be threatened by a simple housekeeper. "I want you to find out everything about this woman, Maurice. Where she came from, why she's here, any interaction she has with Sophia. Everything, understood?" "Yes, doctor. Leave it to me." Hanging up, Melinda took a deep breath, trying to reorganize her thoughts. She needed to meet this Lucy as soon as possible and, if necessary, remove her from the path. After all, no one, absolutely no one, would stand between her and her plans for Richard Reynolds. In the weeks that followed, a subtle transformation began to occur in the Reynolds mansion. Sophia, who previously spent entire days locked in her room, now ventured into the property's gardens, always accompanied by Lucy's watchful eye, who pretended to be busy with tasks near the girl. Although they didn't exchange many words, Sophia was still extremely selective in her interactions. A silent bond formed between the two. Sometimes the girl simply sat beside Lucy while she folded clothes or arranged flowers in the living room vases. On other occasions, Sophia followed her like a small shadow through the mansion's corridors. "It's impressive," Eleanor commented to Lucy, as they watched Sophia draw peacefully on the veranda. "In 3 weeks, she's only had one crisis, and it was much less intense than the previous ones." "She just needs to feel safe," Lucy replied, her gaze softened by tenderness. "When Gabriel got agitated, I realized it was no use forcing him. The world is already scary enough for children like them." Richard Reynolds had also noticed the change. That Saturday morning, he watched his daughter from his office, through the window overlooking the garden. Sophia was sitting on the grass, with Lucy a few feet away, hanging sheets on the clothesline. From time to time the girl looked at the maid, as if checking that she was still there. "Something happened," Richard murmured to himself, observing the scene with a mixture of relief and curiosity. The businessman had cancelled several engagements in recent weeks to be more present at home, intrigued by Sophia's sudden improvement. Therapists' reports indicated modest but consistent progress. Dr. Melinda Foster attributed the advancements to adjustments in her therapeutic approach, but Richard intuited that there was something more. Taking his coffee, Richard walked downstairs and into the garden. Sophia noticed his approach and, to her father's surprise, did not show her usual discomfort. She remained focused on her drawing, allowing him to get closer than usual. "Good morning, Mr. Reynolds," Lucy greeted, making a move to step away to give the employer and his daughter privacy. "Stay, please," he requested, noticing how Sophia's eyes followed the maid's movements. "It seems my daughter appreciates your company." Lucy blushed slightly but remained where she was, continuing her task in silence. Richard knelt beside Sophia, maintaining a respectful distance. "What are you drawing, Princess?" Sophia didn't respond verbally, but turned the paper towards her father. The drawing, though simple as would be expected from a 7-year-old, showed a figure Richard recognized as Lucy, surrounded by small, colorful musical notes. "It's very beautiful, Sophia," Richard praised, genuinely moved by this rare moment of connection. "Do you like it when Lucy is around?" To Richard's absolute astonishment, Sophia nodded slightly, an almost imperceptible gesture, but one that, for a father desperate for any form of communication, meant the world. Richard's eyes filled with tears that he quickly disguised. Standing up, he looked at Lucy with an indecipherable expression. "Thank you," he said simply, before walking away. Lucy remained motionless, not fully understanding what she was being thanked for. She had no idea how that brief moment had impacted Richard, nor how the image of Sophia nodding for the first time in months would be etched into her father's memory. What none of them noticed was the figure of Maurice, the driver, observing everything discreetly from the garage entrance, cell phone in hand. That same afternoon, Dr. Melinda Foster arrived for her weekly session with Sophia. Upon entering the mansion, she immediately noticed the different atmosphere. The usual tension that permeated the environment seemed to have lessened, as if the house could finally breathe. Victoria received her in the main living room, more animated than usual. "Melinda, darling, you're a genius," the socialite exclaimed, air-kissing the psychologist's cheeks. "Sophia is so much more controlled. I even managed to take her to the salon with me yesterday, without any fuss. Imagine that." Melinda forced a smile, while her stomach churned with the information Maurice had shared. Sophia's improvement was undeniable, but she knew it had nothing to do with her treatment. "I'm very happy to hear that, Victoria. Where is our little patient?" "In the garden with the staff. That new southern girl seems to have a way with her. It must be because she's simple, you know, less intimidating than us," Victoria commented, with her usual disdain when referring to employees. Melinda walked to the garden, where she found Sophia sitting under a mango tree, leafing through a picture book. Lucy was a few feet away, sweeping fallen leaves. The psychologist carefully observed the interaction between the two, noting how the girl occasionally looked up to check the maid's presence. "Sophia, hello," Melinda approached with her professional smile. "It's time for our special talk." To her irritation, Sophia recoiled slightly, gripping the book more tightly. The contrast between this reaction and the apparent tranquility the girl displayed in Lucy's presence was like a slap in the psychologist's face. "Perhaps I should withdraw," Lucy offered, noticing Sophia's sudden discomfort. "Yes, withdraw," Melinda replied dryly. "The session is private." As Lucy walked away, Melinda noticed how Sophia's eyes followed her, with a trace of anxiety appearing on her face. The psychologist sat beside the girl, but kept her attention divided between her patient and the figure of the maid disappearing towards the house. Something had to be done. And fast. After the session, which proceeded with Sophia's usual lack of engagement, Melinda sought Richard in his office. The businessman received her with unusual animation. "Melinda, did you notice the improvement? She even nodded today," he exclaimed, offering the psychologist a chair. "Yes, Richard, and that's exactly what we need to talk about," she replied, adjusting her tone to convey professional concern. "I'm observing some unsettling patterns." Richard's smile gradually disappeared. "What do you mean? I thought we were celebrating progress." "And we are, in a way," Melinda carefully chose her words. "But I'm concerned about how Sophia seems to be developing a dependence on the new maid." "Dependence? She just seems comfortable around her." "Exactly, and that could be problematic in the long run," Melinda continued, leaning forward with a grave expression. "You see, Sophia needs to develop emotional autonomy. This apparent improvement might be masking a new pattern of insecure attachment, which would be disastrous for her development." Richard frowned, processing the information. The idea of questioning something that finally seemed to be working for his daughter bothered him, but the trust he placed in Melinda's expertise made him hesitate. "What do you suggest, then?" Melinda smiled internally, pleased that Richard still trusted her opinion. "For now, just careful observation, but I recommend limiting direct contact between Sophia and this... What's her name again?" "Lucy," Richard replied. "Lucy Miller." "Yes, Lucy. We need to assess if Sophia can maintain this progress without her constant presence. It's crucial for the treatment." Richard nodded slowly, though a part of him remained resistant to the idea. "I'll speak with Eleanor to reorganize her tasks, but if Sophia starts having crises again, then we'll know we're dealing with a detrimental dependency, not genuine progress," Melinda completed, with a resolute tone. "Trust me, Richard. I know what's best for Sophia." Meanwhile, in the mansion's kitchen, Lucy prepared chamomile tea, following Eleanor's instructions. The housekeeper had mentioned that Sophia usually drank it before bed. On the rare days she accepted anything other than water. "She likes it with a small spoon of honey," Eleanor explained, carefully observing Lucy's movements. "You truly have a special way with her, child. I've never seen her accept tea from anyone." Lucy smiled, mixing the honey into the fragrant drink. "My Gabriel was like that too. He disliked most flavors, but Chamomile tea with honey was our ritual before bed. Lucy's expression softened as she mentioned her son, but Eleanor noticed the pain that still lived in her eyes. How did he... The housekeeper began, hesitant. Pneumonia, Lucy replied, her voice choked. The autism treatment already consumed my entire salary. When he got sick, I couldn't afford the proper medication. The public clinic took too long. Eleanor gently squeezed the young woman's shoulder. I'm so sorry, my dear. God knows what he's doing. Sometimes I think he brought me here for a reason, Lucy confessed, discreetly wiping a tear. When I see Sophia, it's as if a part of my Gabriel is back. The moment was interrupted by Victoria's abrupt entrance into the kitchen. Rarely seen in that area of the house, her presence caused immediate discomfort. Where is that Southern girl? She asked, completely ignoring the fact that Lucy was right in front of her. Ah, there you are. I want to talk about the rules of this house. Lucy straightened her posture, trying to maintain her composure in the face of the hostile tone. Yes, ma'am, how can I help? Melinda told me about your improper approach with my daughter. Victoria practically spat the words. Let me be clear. You were hired to clean, not to play therapist. Sophia has the country's best specialist looking after her. She doesn't need a... She paused, looking Lucy up and down with disdain. Unqualified domestic interfering. Eleanor opened her mouth to defend Lucy, but the young woman discreetly touched her arm, signaling that she would handle the situation. I understand perfectly, Mrs. Reynolds. It was never my intention to overstep boundaries. I merely respond when the girl addresses me, as I would with anyone. Well, don't respond anymore, Victoria retorted. In fact, I want you away from the social areas when you're doing your tasks, and especially away from Sophia's room. Is that clear? Crystal clear, ma'am, Lucy replied, maintaining her dignity despite the humiliation. Satisfied with the display of power, Victoria turned on her heels and left, leaving a heavy silence behind. Don't mind her, Eleanor whispered as soon as they were sure Victoria was far enough away. She's a viper with a peacock's tail. She only cares about appearances. Lucy nodded, but her heart was heavy. Not because of the humiliation, to which she was accustomed after years of working in family homes, but because of the possibility of being kept away from Sophia. In just a few weeks, that silent child had filled a void Lucy had carried since Gabriel's passing. What she didn't know was that this was just the beginning of a systematic campaign to isolate her. In the days that followed, Victoria and Melinda would work together, one motivated by wounded vanity, the other by obsessive jealousy, both determined to destroy the fragile bond forming between Sophia and the only person who had managed to reach her in her world of silence. The rain lashed down on Los Angeles that Thursday morning, turning the streets of Bel Air into small rivers and filling the Reynolds mansion with the rhythmic sound of drops against the window panes. Inside the property, a different storm was brewing, silent and calculated. In the main living room, Victoria displayed her latest treasure, an emerald necklace surrounded by small diamonds, a wedding anniversary gift Richard had given her the day before. $60,000, just imagine, she commented to her friend Patricia, another socialite from the same circle. Richard tried to compensate for his absence in recent months with this, as if stones could replace attention. Patricia admired the jewel with a mixture of envy and fascination. Still, it's stunning, Victoria. It perfectly matches that Versace dress you wore to the charity event last month. As the two women chatted, Lucy discreetly entered the room to serve coffee. In the past 2 weeks, her routine had been drastically altered. Her tasks now focused on areas further away from where Sophia usually stayed, and Eleanor, pressured by Victoria, couldn't do much to help. Be careful with that, Southern girl, Victoria snapped when Lucy approached with the tray. If you spill coffee on my Persian rug, it'll come out of your salary. Yes, ma'am, Lucy replied, maintaining a neutral face as she precisely poured the porcelain cups. Victoria made sure to keep the necklace very visible throughout Patricia's visit, occasionally touching the precious stones as she spoke, ensuring Lucy could clearly see the object's value. Later that same day, Melinda arrived for her session with Sophia. The girl had visibly regressed in recent weeks, returning to isolation and refusing to participate in proposed activities. For the psychologist, this was simultaneously frustrating and convenient. It confirmed her theory about Sophia's detrimental dependency on Lucy, but also meant that her plan of estrangement was working. After the session, Melinda sought Richard in his office. The businessman seemed more dejected than usual, with deep dark circles under his eyes evidencing sleepless nights. "How is she?" he asked, as soon as Melinda entered. "Resistant," the psychologist replied, carefully choosing her words. "But that was expected, Richard. It's part of the therapeutic process. We need Sophia to develop internal resources to cope with her emotions, rather than relying on external figures." Richard sighed, running a hand through the graying hair at his temples. "She's having nightmares again. She screams during the night. It's like we're back to square one." Melinda nodded with a sympathetic expression, while internally celebrating the progress of her plan. "Have patience. These setbacks are normal before significant progress," the businessman agreed, though his eyes revealed growing doubts. Deep down, he began to question if he was making the right choice by keeping Lucy away from Sophia. In the brief moments he saw his daughter in the mansion's corridors, he noticed how her eyes searched for someone who was no longer there. "By the way," Melinda continued, deliberately changing the subject, "I noticed Victoria was displaying a magnificent necklace today. Your anniversary gift?" "Yes, though I completely missed the timing," Richard replied, with a faint, tired smile. "I should have given it during dinner, but a crisis with Sophia. Well, you know how it is." Melinda returned the smile, lightly touching Richard's arm in a gesture meant to be comforting, but carrying a calculated intimacy. "You're an incredible man, Richard. Patient, dedicated. Victoria is very lucky." The businessman seemed uncomfortable with the comment, subtly pulling away. "I just try to do my best for my family." Noticing the retreat, Melinda quickly recomposed her professional demeanor and bid farewell, promising to return in 2 days for the next session. Leaving the office, she found Maurice waiting in the corridor. With a discreet nod, she led the driver to her car, where they could talk unheard. "Is everything prepared?" she asked, as soon as they got into the vehicle. "Yes, doctor, I got it as you asked," Maurice replied, handing her a small golden key. "It's a copy of the key to the room where that southern girl keeps her things. I bribed one of the gardeners to get it." Melinda smiled, putting the key into her Italian leather purse. "Excellent. And the item I asked for?" "It's here too." Maurice took a thin gold chain with a small cross pendant from his pocket. "I got it from the same store you mentioned. It's practically identical to what the maid wears." "Perfect." Melinda examined the object with satisfaction. "Now we just need to wait for the right moment. I want you to observe Victoria's habits. When does she usually wear the necklace?" "From what I've noticed, she keeps it in her jewelry box in the bedroom. She only wears it for special occasions." "Great. Let me know the next time she takes off the necklace. I need it to be on a day when I'm here for a session with Sophia." As the conspiracy unfolded, Lucy faced her own challenges. Kept away from Sophia, she felt increasingly isolated in the mansion. The other employees, sensing her disfavor with Victoria, kept their distance, fearing being associated with her. Only Eleanor remained supportive, finding discreet moments to offer words of comfort. "Have patience, child," the housekeeper advised as they both organized the pantry, away from curious glances. "This storm will pass." "I don't know, Mrs. Thompson," Lucy replied in a low voice. "I feel like they're pushing me out of here. And I worry about Sophia. She was making progress." I know, I noticed the difference too. But we're dealing with powerful people. That doctor has Mr. Reynolds wrapped around her finger, and the mistress is, well, you know how she is." Lucy nodded, holding back the tears that threatened to fall. In recent days she had considered resigning, but her concern for Sophia prevented her. Besides, she desperately needed the job. Her mother, Mrs. Caroline, still depended on expensive heart medication, and the salary from the Reynolds mansion, even with all the problems, was higher than what she could get elsewhere. "I'll endure," she finally said, more to herself than to Eleanor. "For Sophia, for my mother." 2 days later, Melinda's plan was put into action. It was a sunny Saturday, and Victoria had decided to wear the emerald necklace for a luncheon with friends. Upon returning, she left the jewel on her dressing table while taking a relaxing bath. Melinda, who was finishing a session with Sophia, received a discreet message from Maurice informing her of the situation. With the excuse of needing to use the restroom, the psychologist headed to the mansion's upper floor. Knowing the house's routine well, she knew Victoria would take at least half an hour for her post-bath beauty ritual. With quick and silent movements, Melinda entered the couple's bedroom, took the necklace, and hid it in her purse. Then, using the key provided by Maurice, she entered the small room where Lucy slept in the employees' annex. The space was simple, almost Spartan. A precisely made single bed, a small wardrobe, a table with a worn Bible, and a picture frame with a photo of a smiling boy. Gabriel, Melinda imagined. Beside the photo, a simple beaded rosary and a medicine bottle with the name Caroline Miller on it. For a very brief instant, Melinda felt a pang of guilt upon seeing that modest life full of pain. But the image of Richard smiling at Lucy in the garden quickly overshadowed any hesitation. With renewed determination, she hid the emerald necklace at the bottom of the second wardrobe drawer, under some clothes. As she left, she placed the small cross pendant she had bought on the table beside the picture frame. It was a calculated detail, to create the impression that Lucy had recently bought something new, something her income shouldn't allow. Back in the main mansion, Melinda resumed her session with Sophia as if nothing had happened, while she waited for the chaos that would ensue. It didn't take long. Just over an hour later, Victoria's screams echoed through the house. "My necklace! My emerald necklace! It's gone!" The mansion was quickly mobilized. Employees were called to help with the search, while Richard tried to calm his hysterical wife. "It must be somewhere, Victoria. You might have put it away somewhere else without realizing it." "I didn't put it away somewhere else, Richard," she yelled, furious. "It was right here on my dressing table. Someone stole it." Melinda, who conveniently was still in the house, joined the commotion with a worried expression. "Perhaps we should call the police," she suggested, knowing exactly how Victoria would react. "The police? And have our name plastered all over the papers? Not a chance," the socialite exclaimed. "I want all the employees gathered in the living room, now." Eleanor, her face pale with the gravity of the situation, quickly gathered the entire staff. Lucy, who was in the garden collecting herbs for tea, entered last, not understanding what was happening. Victoria glared at them one by one with furious eyes. "One of you stole my emerald necklace," she accused directly. "I want a confession now, or everyone will be fired and reported to the police." A heavy silence fell over the room. The employees exchanged glances, confused and scared. Richard, visibly uncomfortable with his wife's approach, tried to intervene. "Victoria, we can't just accuse—" "Silence, Richard," she cut him off. "I know it was one of them. Probably the one who arrived last." All eyes turned to Lucy, who remained impassive, though her heart was pounding. "I didn't take anything, ma'am," she said with dignity. "I would never do that." Victoria scoffed with disdain. "Of course you'd say that. Eleanor, I want all the employees' rooms searched right now." The housekeeper, knowing Lucy well enough to know she would be incapable of such an act, hesitated. "Ma'am, perhaps we should wait—" "Now, Eleanor, or you're dismissed too." With a heavy heart, Eleanor organized teams to search the employees' quarters. Melinda offered to help, ensuring she would be present when the necklace was found. The search lasted almost an hour. Drawers were opened, mattresses flipped, personal belongings exposed. The dignity of the workers, already fragile from the accusation, was shattered with each new object turned over. Finally, in Lucy's small room, Maurice, strategically assigned to that area, found the necklace, exactly where Melinda had hidden it. "Here," he shouted, raising the jewel for everyone to see. "I found it at the bottom of her drawer." The shock was immediate. Lucy, who was watching the scene from the doorway, felt as if the floor disappeared beneath her feet. "No, it's not possible," she stammered, genuinely stunned. "I never... Melinda, who was nearby, pretended to notice the small pendant on the table. "And look at this," she said, picking up the golden cross. "A new pendant. It looks like real gold to me. Interesting how someone on your salary can afford something like this, isn't it?" Lucy's face paled even further. She hadn't even noticed that object before. It certainly wasn't hers. "That's not mine. I've never seen that before." Victoria advanced, taking the necklace from Maurice's hands and examining it with growing fury. "Thief!" she spat, turning to Lucy. "You came into my house, gained our trust, and this is how you repay us." "Ma'am, for all that is holy, I did not take this jewel," Lucy pleaded, tears in her eyes. "Someone must have put it there to frame me." Eleanor, realizing that something was very wrong, tried to intervene. "Mr. Reynolds, this doesn't make sense. I know Lucy, she wouldn't do this." But Richard, pressured by the situation, by his wife's accusing gaze, and by Melinda's seemingly rational presence, hesitated. Part of him wanted to believe Lucy, the woman who had brought a brief period of peace to his daughter. But the evidence seemed irrefutable. "Lucy, he began, unsure what to say. "I want her out of here now," Victoria interrupted. "And consider yourself lucky we're not calling the police." With a broken heart and her dignity in tatters, Lucy tried once more. "Mr. Reynolds, for God's sake, look at me. I took care of your daughter. I saw her suffering. Why would I destroy everything by stealing a necklace?" For a moment, Richard seemed to waver. His eyes met Lucy's, and something in that sincere gaze made him doubt. But before he could respond, Melinda gently touched his arm. "Richard, remember what we discussed about emotional manipulation," she whispered, just loud enough for Victoria to also hear. "It's a common tactic." Those words, spoken with the authority of an expert, sealed Lucy's fate. Richard looked away, unable to face both his wife and the psychologist he had trusted for so long. "Pack your things and leave," he finally said, his voice choked. "We won't call the police, but I can't keep you here after this." The triumph in Melinda's eyes was brief but intense. Victoria, satisfied with the outcome, retreated to her room, while the other employees dispersed in silence, avoiding looking at Lucy. Only Eleanor remained, helping the young woman gather her few belongings into a worn suitcase. "This isn't right," the housekeeper murmured, dismayed. "Someone framed you. I'm sure of it." Lucy, now openly weeping, merely shook her head. "It doesn't matter anymore, Mrs. Thompson. I only worry about Sophia and about my mother. How will I pay for her medicine now?" The rain, which had paused during the day, returned mercilessly in the late afternoon, as if the sky itself wept for the injustice befalling the young southern woman. With her small suitcase and a broken heart, Lucy left the Reynolds mansion through the back door. At the exact moment she crossed the property gates, a sharp, desperate scream cut through the air. It was Sophia, who watched Lucy's departure from her bedroom window. The crisis that followed was the worst the family had ever witnessed. The girl thrashed, screamed, and hurt herself, while repeating a single sound, almost unrecognizable amidst the despair, but which strangely sounded like Lucy's name. No one could calm her that night, not Richard, nor the medications, nor even Melinda, who watched the scene with a mixture of professional concern and personal satisfaction. In her mind, distorted by jealousy, everything was going according to plan. Sophia would once again depend exclusively on her, and Richard, in his despair, would increasingly turn to the only person who could seemingly help his daughter. What Melinda didn't know was that, in the days that followed, Sophia's drawings would reveal a truth that no manipulation could hide for long. 3 weeks passed since Lucy's departure, and the Reynolds mansion had transformed into an even darker place. Sophia had regressed completely, refusing to leave her room, rejecting food and ignoring any attempt at interaction. The crises, once sporadic, now occurred almost daily, leaving the girl exhausted and more isolated. Richard had practically moved into his home office, cancelling meetings and delegating responsibilities, to be near his daughter, even though Sophia barely acknowledged his presence. The deep dark circles under his eyes and his unshaven beard revealed sleepless nights, growing worries, and a sense of helplessness that gnawed at him from within. Victoria, on the other hand, had found freedom in her husband's absence to intensify her social life. She was rarely home, and when she was, she kept her distance from her daughter's room, claiming that the doctors needed space to work. The emerald necklace, recovered and now kept in a safe, seemed to have lost some of its luster for her after the incident. On a particularly difficult morning, after a night when Sophia had slept no more than 2 consecutive hours, Eleanor entered the girl's room for the usual cleaning. The scene was desolate. Untouched toys, half-eaten food, and a child huddled in bed staring fixedly out the window. "Good morning, Sophia," the housekeeper greeted without expecting a response. Following her routine, she began to organize the space, changing sheets and collecting dishes. As she bent down to check under the bed, she noticed something unusual: several crumpled papers, hidden against the wall. Intrigued, Eleanor carefully picked them up. They were drawings, dozens of them, made with childlike yet intense strokes. In each one the same figure appeared, a woman with dark hair and a gentle smile, whom Eleanor immediately recognized as Lucy. In some, The figure was surrounded by small, colourful musical notes. In others, she appeared holding hands with a small girl who could only be Sophia. What most surprised the housekeeper, however, was finding recent drawings. The pencil mark still fresh, the paper still with its crisp folds. Sophia was drawing Lucy every day, hiding the images like small treasures. "My goodness," Eleanor murmured, feeling her eyes well up. Sophia, realizing her drawings had been discovered, suddenly turned to Eleanor. Her eyes, previously vacant, now showed intense emotion, a mixture of fear and pleading. "Don't worry, little one," Eleanor whispered, tucking the papers into her apron pocket. "Your secret is safe with me." That same day, while tidying Richard's office, Eleanor noticed the businessman asleep on his desk, surrounded by medical reports and Dr. Melinda Foster's notes. His face, even in sleep, retained an expression of worry and fatigue. The housekeeper hesitated for a moment, considering the consequences of what she was about to do. In almost 20 years working for the Reynolds, she had never interfered in family matters. But the image of Sophia, isolated and suffering, combined with Richard's deplorable state, made her make a decision. "Mr. Reynolds," she called softly, lightly touching her employer's shoulder. Richard woke with a start, blinking several times to adjust his vision. "Eleanor? Did something happen to Sophia?" "No, sir. I mean, not now, but there's something you need to see." With deliberately slow movements, Eleanor took the drawings from her pocket and spread them on the table, one after another, forming a kind of mosaic of Sophia's obsession with Lucy. "I found these hidden in her room today." "There are even more," the housekeeper explained, carefully observing Richard's reaction. The businessman examined each drawing with growing uneasiness. His eyes scanned the childlike strokes, immediately recognizing the central figure in all the images. "When did she do these?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "Some are from before the necklace incident," Eleanor replied, carefully choosing her words. "But many are recent. Sophia draws Lucy every day, then hides the papers." Richard ran a hand through his hair, visibly disturbed. "Why are you showing me this now, Eleanor?" The housekeeper took a deep breath before responding. "Because I can no longer bear to see the girls suffering, sir, and because I'm certain Lucy didn't steal that necklace." Richard's gaze hardened. "The necklace was in her drawer. Everyone saw it." "Yes, sir. Everyone saw it. But think about it. Lucy was always careful, respectful. Why would she risk everything by stealing something so valuable and easy to identify? Why would she hide it in her own drawer, the most obvious place?" Richard remained silent, processing the questioning. The same doubts had already crossed his mind, but Victoria's pressure and Melinda's words always seemed stronger. "Furthermore," Eleanor continued, gaining courage, "do you remember how Sophia improved when Lucy arrived, and how she worsened after she left? Doesn't that make you question anything?" The businessman stared at the drawings again, feeling an uncomfortable sensation grow in his chest. What if he had made a terrible mistake? What if he had driven away the only person who had truly managed to help his daughter? "Thank you, Eleanor. I'll think about it." The housekeeper nodded and left silently, leaving Richard immersed in conflicting thoughts and painful doubts. In the following weeks, Richard began to observe Sophia with new eyes. He noticed how the girl frequently looked at the door, as if expecting someone. He perceived her disappointment when it wasn't Lucy who entered. On one occasion, he caught his daughter softly humming the same song that, unbeknownst to him, Lucy used to sing to her. Sessions with Melinda continued, but Richard began to notice inconsistencies in the psychologist's behavior. At times, she seemed more interested in discussing his personal life than Sophia's condition. On other occasions, she mentioned subtle progress that he simply couldn't identify. The seed of distrust, planted by Eleanor, grew stronger each day. On a Saturday afternoon, while Sophia slept after a particularly intense crisis, Richard decided to visit Melinda's office. Claiming to need documents for a new specialist, he convinced the secretary to let him wait in the psychologist's room. Alone in the elegant minimalist office, Richard observed the framed diplomas, the carefully organized books, the armchair where his daughter was supposed to feel safe. Everything seemed impeccable, professional, until his eyes fell upon a half-open drawer in the desk. Something compelled him to look. Perhaps it was a father's desperation, perhaps intuition, or perhaps simply chance. Inside the drawer, a small black-covered notebook caught his attention. It didn't look like a professional document, but something personal. Richard knew he shouldn't, that he was invading someone's privacy, but the thought of Sophia and her drawings gave him the necessary courage. He opened the notebook and began to read. The first pages seemed harmless. Notes about patients, bibliographical references, personal reminders. But as he went on, the content changed dramatically. Entire passages were dedicated to Richard. Detailed descriptions of his clothes, his gestures, even conversations transcribed word for word. There were fantasies about a future together, plans to distance Victoria, strategies to create emotional dependence, and then, the most shocking revelation, explicit descriptions of the plan to incriminate Lucy, including details about the stolen necklace, the duplicated key to the maid's room, and even mentions of the planted pendant to reinforce suspicions. "The plan worked perfectly," read a recent entry. "That meddling southern girl is finally out of the way. Sophia is back to depending on me, and Richard is more vulnerable than ever. It's only a matter of time until he realizes that only I can help his precious daughter. And when that happens..." Richard felt his blood run cold. The woman he had entrusted with his daughter's mental health, the professional who had guided crucial decisions for his family, was nothing more than an obsessed manipulator. Worse still, she had deliberately sabotaged Sophia's treatment to serve her own sick interests. Taking his cell phone from his pocket, Richard photographed the most compromising pages of the diary. Then he put everything back exactly as he had found it and left the office, telling the secretary he would return later. On the way home, a storm of emotions overwhelmed him. Guilt for having doubted Lucy, anger at Melinda, despair at the thought of Sophia's unnecessary suffering. But above all, a fierce determination took shape. He needed to fix the terrible mistake he had made. Upon arriving at the mansion, Richard went directly to Victoria, who was preparing for another social event. "We need to talk," he said, with a firmness he hadn't shown in a long time. Victoria rolled her eyes, continuing to apply perfume to her wrists. "Not now, Richard. I'm late for the Foundation's cocktail party." "Now, Victoria," he insisted, blocking the closet door. "It's about the theft of your necklace." This captured her attention. Victoria turned, intrigued. "What about my necklace? We've already recovered it. The matter is closed." "No, it's not. Lucy didn't steal your jewel. Melinda set the whole thing up." Victoria scoffed with disdain. "Are you crazy? Why would Melinda do something like that?" Richard held out his cell phone, showing the photos of the diary. "Read it yourself." As Victoria scrolled through the images, her expression changed from skepticism to surprise, and finally to shock. When she finished reading, she was pale. "My God, she's completely insane," she exclaimed, handing the cell phone back to Richard. "We have to fire her immediately and report her to the Board of Psychology." "We'll do that. But first I have another priority," Richard replied, already heading for the door. "Which is, find Lucy and bring her back, for Sophia." Victoria hesitated, her pride battling against the irrefutable evidence that she had participated, albeit indirectly, in a terrible injustice. "Richard, wait," she called, surprising her husband. I'm sorry, I should never have accused that girl without concrete proof." It was the closest thing to an apology Victoria was capable of offering. Richard nodded briefly, acknowledging the gesture but without time to explore it. There were urgent decisions to be made. First, a call to the law firm representing his companies. The subject, immediate termination of Dr. Melinda Foster and possible legal action for unethical conduct and emotional damages. Next, a meeting with Eleanor. "I need Lucy's address," he explained to the housekeeper, who smiled for the first time in weeks. "It was about time, boss. It was about time." Meanwhile, Sophia continued in her room, drawing another image of Lucy. This time, however, there was something different in the drawing. The figure of the woman was not alone, but holding hands with a representation of Sophia. And above the two, written in childlike, trembling handwriting, a single word that Sophia had never pronounced, not even in the times when she still spoke: Mommy. The outskirts of Los Angeles displayed a brutal contrast with Bel Air. The narrow, poorly paved streets of the Compton neighborhood snaked between simple, unfinished constructions, where exposed bricks told stories of deferred dreams. It was in this setting that Richard parked his Mercedes, attracting curious glances from local residents. Following Eleanor's directions, The businessman walked to a small two-room house, painted in a faded blue hue. An elderly woman sat on the makeshift porch, knitting with trembling hands. "Good morning," Richard greeted, uncomfortable in his expensive suit. "I'm looking for Lucy Miller." The old woman, who was none other than Mrs. Caroline, Lucy's mother, raised her tired eyes to the stranger. "And who is looking for her?" "My name is Richard Reynolds. He hesitated, feeling the weight of guilt. "Am her former employer." Mrs. Caroline's face hardened immediately. "Ah, so it's you. The man who accused my daughter of being a thief and sent her away in the rain," she said, with a dignity that surprised Richard. "Lucy isn't here. She went looking for work, as she does every day since you destroyed her reputation." The words hit Richard like a punch. In his privileged world, he rarely faced the direct consequences of his actions. Now, before that fragile yet strong-spirited old woman, the extent of the harm he had caused became painfully clear. "Mrs. Caroline, I came to ask your daughter for forgiveness," he said with sincerity. "I made a terrible mistake. Lucy was unjustly accused, and I discovered the whole truth." The old woman assessed him for a few moments, as if she could see beyond his impeccable appearance and refined vocabulary. "What do you want from her now?" "I want to offer her job back. My daughter, Sophia, she hasn't been well since Lucy left. In fact, she's worse than ever." Mrs. Caroline sighed, setting her knitting aside. "Lucy isn't well either. She cries every night for your little girl. She used to say that Sophia reminded her of Gabriel, that it was as if God had given her a second chance." The elderly woman paused, as if deciding whether to continue. "You know, her Gabriel was just like your daughter. He had the same frightened eyes, the same fear of the world." Richard felt a lump in his throat. He had never asked Lucy about her life, her losses, her pains. For him, until that moment, she had been merely an efficient employee, then a possible positive influence on Sophia, and finally, a supposed thief. Never a complete person, with her own story. "I didn't know she had a son," he murmured. "She did. An angel who left us too soon," Mrs. Caroline replied, her eyes watery. "His autism was similar to what your daughter has. Lucy dedicated her life to caring for the boy, self-studied, took free courses. When he left, a part of her also left." The silence that followed was interrupted by the sound of footsteps. Lucy appeared at the end of the street, walking slowly, her shoulders slumped in a posture that spoke of tiredness and defeat. Upon spotting Richard, she stopped abruptly as if she had seen a ghost. "Mr. Reynolds!" Her voice came out almost as a whisper. The businessman stood up, feeling strangely nervous. "Lucy, I need to talk to you for an instant." Fear crossed her face. Richard realized that his presence there could mean more problems, perhaps a formal accusation, perhaps some threat. The thought that he inspired fear instead of respect deeply bothered him. "I discovered the truth about the necklace," he said directly. "Melinda set the whole thing up. She confessed in her diary you never stole anything." Lucy blinked several times, processing the information. There was no surprise on her face, just a kind of silent validation. "Why?" she finally asked. "Jealousy. Obsession. She had a fixation on me, and she saw how Sophia improved with you. She felt threatened," Richard explained, ashamed for having been so blind. "Lucy, I came here to ask for your forgiveness and to beg you to come back. Sophia needs you." Upon hearing the girl's name, Lucy's eyes softened. "How is she?" "Bad. Very bad. She's back to having daily crises. She doesn't eat properly, she doesn't speak." He paused, pondering whether he should share the next detail. "And she draws you every day. She hides the drawings under her bed, like little treasures." A tear escaped and ran down Lucy's face. Mrs. Caroline, who had been observing the conversation in silence, rose with difficulty and touched her daughter's arm. "Go, my daughter. That little girl needs you." Lucy looked at her mother, then at Richard, clearly torn. "I can't abandon you, Mother. Your medicine, the care—" Richard intervened. "Mrs. Caroline would come too, of course. We have several empty rooms in the guest house, and I'll personally ensure she has the best medical treatment available." Lucy's eyes widened at the unexpected offer. "You would do that?" "It's the least I can do after the injustice I committed," he replied, with genuine humility. "But I need to be honest. I'm not just offering your job back. I want to propose something different." "Different how?" I want you to be Sophia's official caregiver, not an employee, but someone dedicated exclusively to her well-being, with a salary commensurate with the role, someone who can help her reconnect with the world as you've already started to do." Lucy absorbed the proposal in silence. After a few moments, she asked, "And your wife? Would she agree to this? Victoria knows the truth now too, and that things are changing in our family." Richard hesitated, then decided to be completely transparent. "We're getting a divorce, Lucy. The situation had been deteriorating for years, but recent events made it clear that our paths are incompatible." The revelation surprised both Lucy and Mrs. Caroline. The elderly woman, with the wisdom of her years, was the first to speak. "I'm sorry about your marriage, sir, but perhaps it's what God wants for your family now." Richard nodded, grateful for the non-judgmental understanding. "So, Lucy, what do you say? Sophia is waiting." Upon hearing the girl's name again, Lucy needed no further reflection. "I'll pack our things," she replied, her eyes shining for the first time in weeks, for Sophia. 2 hours later, Richard's Mercedes once again passed through the gates of the mansion in Bel Air. In the back seat, Lucy held Mrs. Caroline's hand, both visibly nervous about the new situation. Eleanor waited for them at the entrance with a smile that lit up her tired face. Upon seeing Lucy, she hugged her tightly. "Thank goodness you're back, child. This house isn't the same without you." "Where is Sophia?" Lucy asked, anxious. "In her room. She had a severe crisis this morning. She's exhausted," the housekeeper replied, guiding them inside. Upstairs, Richard stopped before his daughter's bedroom door. "Do you want to go in alone first?" he offered Lucy. With a racing heart, she nodded. Taking a deep breath, she gently opened the door and entered the now familiar room. Sophia was lying on her back to the entrance, curled in a fetal position. Her disheveled hair and irregular breathing indicated exhaustion after hours of crisis. On the bed and scattered across the floor, dozens of drawings with the same central figure. "Lucy." "Sophia!" she called, her voice soft. "It's me, Lucy." For a moment nothing happened. Then, slowly, as if fearing it was just another illusion, Sophia turned. Her eyes, normally distant, immediately focused on Lucy. There was an instant of absolute suspension, as if time had frozen. And then, the miracle. Sophia sprang up and ran to Lucy, throwing herself into her arms with surprising force. Her small body trembled, not from fear or anxiety, but from pure emotion. She clung to Lucy's neck as if her life depended on it, while silent sobs shook her shoulders. "I'm here, little one. I'm here," Lucy whispered, cradling the girl in her arms, as tears streamed freely down her own face. "I'll never leave you again." At the bedroom door, Richard watched the scene with a lump in his throat. For the first time in years, he saw his daughter demonstrating a genuine connection with someone. It was like witnessing a miracle. Simple, silent, but absolutely transformative. Days turned into weeks, and the Reynolds mansion gradually transformed. Victoria left for Europe after finalizing the divorce terms, taking with her a generous sum and no interest in Sophia's custody. To Richard's surprise, the separation occurred without the drama he feared, as if both recognized that the marriage had ended long before they admitted it. Mrs. Caroline settled comfortably in the guest house, where Eleanor became a constant friend and confidant. The doctors hired by Richard were amazed by the elderly woman's improvement since beginning appropriate treatment for her heart problems. As for Sophia, her evolution was slow but consistent. Under Lucy's dedicated care, the girl began to rediscover the world. Crises drastically decreased, and small advancements were celebrated as great victories. A spontaneous smile, a hug initiated by her, the acceptance of new foods. On a Saturday morning, while having coffee on the veranda, a sound surprised everyone. Sophia, sitting between Richard and Lucy, looked at her caregiver and pronounced clearly, "Lucy." The silence that followed was broken by Richard's emotional crying. "She spoke. My God, she spoke." Lucy, equally emotional, simply hugged the girl, who repeated the name several times as if savoring each syllable. It was the first word Sophia had pronounced in almost 2 years. In the following months, more words came, always at her own pace. Daddy. Grandma, for Mrs. Caroline. Ellie, for Eleanor. Small sentences began to form, windows into the inner world that Sophia now felt safe to share. Richard, in turn, rediscovered the meaning of being a father. Under Lucy's gentle guidance, he learned to genuinely connect with his daughter, to respect her limits, and to celebrate her achievements. Nights in the office were replaced by drawing sessions in the living room, bedtime stories, and strolls through the garden. Almost imperceptibly, something new began to blossom between Richard and Lucy. It was born of mutual admiration, of gratitude transformed into respect, of respect evolving into friendship. Nights spent talking after Sophia fell asleep, confidences exchanged during garden strolls, glances that lasted a second longer than necessary. On one of those nights, when the mansion was already silent, Richard found Lucy in the library, leafing through a book on special education. "Still studying?" he asked with a smile. "Always," she replied, returning the smile. "I want to better understand how to help Sophia. I'm thinking of going to college for psychology, you know. Now that I have the means." Richard sat beside her, genuinely admiring. "You would be an excellent psychologist. You have a natural intuition for understanding people." "Thank you," Lucy replied, blushing slightly. "It's funny. For so long, I thought Gabriel's loss was the end of my story. Now I realize it was just a chapter. Painful, but not the end." Richard contemplated her words for a moment before responding. "I think we all have chapters like that, moments that seem definitive to us, but are just preparations for what comes next." Their gazes met, and something silent was communicated between them, a mutual understanding, an unexpressed possibility. "Lucy, Richard began, hesitant. "I feel it too," she simply replied, understanding what he had not yet put into words. It was thus, with simplicity and honesty, that the love between them was finally recognized. Not the passionate love of movies, nor the convenient arrangement of marriages of convenience, but something genuine, born of shared pain and joint healing. 6 months after Lucy's return, on a sunny Sunday, Sophia surprised everyone during lunch. Looking from Richard to Lucy and then back to her father, she asked with the innocence characteristic of childhood, "Daddy? Can Lucy be my mommy?" The silence that followed was charged with emotion. Richard looked at Lucy, whose eyes filled with tears, and then at his daughter. "Would you like that, Sophia?" The girl nodded vigorously. "She already is." "Here," she replied, pointing to her own heart. That same afternoon, walking through the garden while Sophia played under Mrs. Caroline's watchful eye, Richard held Lucy's hand and asked the question he had been rehearsing for weeks. "Lucy Miller, would you give me the honor of becoming my wife, of officially being Sophia's mother, as she already considers you in her heart?" With tears in her eyes but a radiant smile on her face, Lucy replied, "Yes, Richard Reynolds. Yes, to both questions." The wedding was held 3 months later in the mansion's garden. It was a simple ceremony with few guests but full of meaning. Sophia, dressed in white, proudly carried the rings, while Mrs. Caroline and Eleanor cried, embracing in the front row. When it was time for the vows, Lucy looked directly into Richard's eyes. "I promise to love not only you but also our family with all the strength of my being. I promise to always remember that the most important bonds are not those of blood, but those we choose to form each day with patience and affection." Richard, his voice choked with emotion, replied, "I promise never again to forget that true value lies in people, not in things. I promise to be not just a husband, but a partner in the journey we've begun. And I promise you and Sophia that our home will always be a place of love, respect, and understanding." After the ceremony, when the few guests had already left, the new family remained in the garden watching the sunset. Sophia, sitting between the two, held their hands, forming a perfect circle. Suddenly, the girl stood up and hugged both of them together, pronouncing the words that definitively sealed that union: "Mommy, Daddy, family." The emotion was so intense that none of the adults could hold back their tears. It was more than a happy ending. It was a new beginning. A year later, Lucy enrolled in psychology college, determined to use her personal experience to help other children like Sophia and Gabriel. Richard reorganized his companies to have more time with his family, delegating responsibilities and redefining priorities. Sophia continued to evolve at her own pace. She started a special school where her artistic sensibility was encouraged. Her drawings, once hidden under the bed, now decorated the walls of the house, colorful witnesses to everyone's journey. On an autumn afternoon during a college class, Lucy was invited to share what had motivated her to study psychology so late in life. Before the class, she took a deep breath and began, "My story begins with pain, but it doesn't end there. I had a son named Gabriel, whose autism led him to live in his own world and who left too soon. I thought my heart would never recover. But then, destiny led me to a little girl named Sophia, who lived in a mansion full of luxuries but empty of true love." She paused, looking out the classroom window as if she could see beyond the university campus, all the way to her home, where she knew Richard and Sophia were waiting for her. "What I learned," she continued, with a firm voice, "is that true love isn't born of blood, but of devotion. That the greatest healings don't come from expensive medicines or sophisticated therapies, but from patience, understanding, and acceptance. I am here because I believe that every child deserves to be seen for who they truly are, not for what we expect them to be." The professor, visibly moved, asked, "And Sophia, how is she now?" Lucy smiled, a luminous smile that spoke of peace found. "She's finding her place in the world. She still has challenges, difficult days, moments of regression, but she also has joys, achievements, moments of deep connection, just like all of us." Upon returning home that night, Lucy found Richard and Sophia in the garden, planting sunflowers. The father, with dirt-stained hands, patiently taught his daughter about seeds and growth. Sophia, focused on the task, followed the instructions with careful attention. Observing the scene, Lucy felt immense gratitude envelop her heart. That house, once cold and distant, had transformed into a true home. That child, once isolated in her suffering, now bloomed each day. That man, once lost between ambitions and appearances, now understood the real meaning of success. When Sophia spotted her, she ran towards her with open arms, a smile lighting up her face. "Mommy, we planted flowers that follow the sun." Lucy hugged her, exchanging a meaningful glance with Richard over the girl's curls. In that simple moment was contained all the truth they had learned together. That love, like sunflowers, always finds a way to turn towards the light, no matter how dark the shadows that try to obscure it. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope that the story of Lucy, Richard, and Sophia has touched your hearts. To continue this journey of emotions, we have prepared a special playlist with equally captivating stories. Find it here by clicking on the left. If this narrative stirred feelings in you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and like the video. Daily we bring unique stories that explore the complexities of life, love, and redemption. Tell us in the comments if you have ever witnessed a transformative love like this in your own lives. We look forward to reading your experiences.